Nice to be back. Certainly nice to be back. It's been a while. And I see JI, who I knew many years ago, and Perry. Uh, my background, one of my degrees was in archaeology. And that greatly influenced the way I worked in paleontology in later years. I worked in 6 or 7 field operations in Manitoba and a couple more here in BC. So I come from come to paleontology with a archaeological slant or background. Greatly affected how I do things. I have a very informal talk, and if somebody wants to ask a question or add to the discussion, please do so. I think you can do it just by pressing your little bar on your computer, and so. But don't hesitate to stop, ask questions, all you want. I was a member of the Vancouver Paleontology Club and the BCPA a number of years ago, and sort of drifted apart around 1995, and but very still active, working of fossils, and I formed what's called the Fraser Center for Eocene Research. It's basically me. I'm the chief cook and bottle washer, but the intent was to collect scientifically specimens that could be used by researchers, and that involved maximizing the amount of data that I was able to obtain. And I made the fossils available to institutions throughout North America, China, and they were involved, or they were used for a number of papers and theses and so on. And I still do that. I still have fossils out, and University of Saskatchewan, Brandon University, folks there that are studying them, and so they go back and forth. And so I have a share screen a little bit, and if I can, I just have to take a moment here and to start my share screen. Let's see. There's something on my desktop. Now let's see. We tend to fumble along with Zoom all the time. I just have to get my main thing out now and find out how to get back on. Okay, it's coming. All right.
Okay, I can see it, Ken.
Okay, they see the BCPA. This is partly what we're talking about today. The standards and ethics evolved when I was a member of the BCPA and the Vancouver Club. I'm not sure whether it's the same, pardon me, if the wording is the same or if it's been added to, but you can help me with that. But I think the gist is probably continued on. And number 4 is to maintain records of geographical and as stratigraphic information on all fossils collected. That's what I do, and probably many of you do as well, and assign an identifying number related to the locality. So we keep our localities separate and well identified. And I would imagine that I'm preaching to the converted here, that all of you do this. I should be able to get to the next screen if I. So I don't know if you recognize this lady. GI. This was on a trip to Harrison that we were just talking about a few minutes ago. And what we're involved here is marine paleontology. And I put it in because what I'm talking about is not this. There's quite a distinction between marine and non-marine paleontology and how things are collected, and you know, it has to do with the strata being quite different. And I'm no expert on marine paleontology at all. I bow to folks like yourself, the Vancouver Club and the Vancouver Island Society. The people there are just phenomenal in their approach to marine paleontology, and I would say the same for the Vancouver Club. So what I'm talking about is quite different than what we're doing here. It's not about marine paleontology, and so I start off with the geographical positions of the places that I visit. One of my projects early on was to help the Geological Survey of Canada correct some of the location data for sites in British Columbia, starting with Dawson's trips out here in 1877. And I would get the help of the GSC with mapping, try to find the same locations that these professionals in the GSC wrote papers for, and see if they were in the same place, because I had the advantage of the modern technology of GPS and maps, and so on, that they didn't have at the time. So mapping, keeping track of the location data is really important. And specifically what I do is try to make an inventory of the various fossils found at each of these locations. One familiar to you is Maccabee. And so this is an early picture of Maccabee. I think the road just went in. You can see my cursor there. I think there's the traces of the road. But the important thing of what I do is, as far as location, not just say that the fossils are from Maccabee, but to identify areas of the site that I'm dealing with, collecting the fossils. So here's a site here, here, and this is important because if I have a collection of spiders and I want to know where to find additional spiders, I know that I would go right there. If I want Metasequoia and ginkgo combinations, I would go right there. And if I was to hunt for a bird, I would go right there. And all of the places where these fossils have been found by myself all have locations within the site. This is important because a lot of people have collected at Maccabee, and when they put down the location, they say it's just Maccabee. They don't say where. Now there are a couple of exceptions. Maccabee recently has there's been a study on the strata, and some of the collections lately have been identified as to where it is, and so that work is still ongoing. But by and large, most of the people who have collected at Maccabee do not indicate where in Maccabee it is, and it's very important whether the material is found here or here or here or over here. And so and when that is identified as to the exact location, it makes it more useful. Is there any questions so far? What's happened, and I'll go back to the other slide, is all of this material at the base here, a lot of it is from the building of the road, so there's a lot of waste material, but not all. A lot of this, and this is an example here, this is material that has been pulled out of situ by someone, and they take a hammer and whack it, hoping that it will split, and if they're lucky, they get to see something. But more often than not, it's destroyed, it's broken, bits and pieces. They don't see some of the very small fossils, and they chuck it away. So I call this technique the whack and chuck method of paleontology, and it's extremely what's the word? Help me out on a word here. Destructive, I suppose, is the best one I could come up with for the fossil. All of the fossil information generally is discarded because it's broken and or it's just not seen. And so there is other ways of collecting the fossils. Now here's a slide that I was showing about the different locations. This could be done at any location where the strata is obvious. There are lots of locations where it's a lacustrine till, there's just cobbles and there is no strata, and so it's very difficult or even impossible to do this. But in areas such as Maccabee, where there is distinctive layers of silt and strata, you could do this. So if I wanted to find, as I was saying before, large slabs of quite a mix of plant material, I would go right here. And if I wanted to find evidences of birds here, or spiders here, and metasequoia and ginkgo right here, and I'm able to tell that from the assemblage of plant animal material that I've collected has been kept together and identified as to these areas within the site. And that, I think, is quite important to do. It's how I do my work. It doesn't necessarily mean it's possible for everybody to do that, but I highly recommend it. And we'll talk about many of the reasons why later on. So this is a typical Maccabee location that has been, it's just mounds and mounds of broken material. Some of it, a lot of it is from the road building that had to be done to satisfy provincial mining regulations, which is an odd state of affairs. I think most people here know the way in which Maccabee came to be. In the early 90s, there was a kitty litter operation from Alberta excavating this bentonite shale stuff in a location not very far from here, and they were headed towards the main Maccabee site. Dave Langevin, who was a avocational paleontologist, and he had a store, took it upon himself to get a mining lease in order to prevent the kitty litter operation from expanding in this direction. So, and he got a lot of flack for that because he was a commercial seller of fossils, and so he had title on this very important fossil site. He got a lot of criticism over the years for that, and we could go into it some other time, but that criticism is really ill-founded, and I'll point out some of the things later on as to why. But in order to have a mining lease, he had to build a road, which is destructive. You know, it just didn't make sense at all. But that's the government at the time, and they just didn't understand the importance of fossils and whatever. So, but anyway, so we have all this rubble here, and one of the things that I try to do is when I'm out at Maccabee and places like Maccabee, is if there's something like this, I gather up as much of that material as I can and cart it home. Part of my background is I taught paleontology at the University of College of the Fraser Valley, and this is my class out at Maccabee, and this is the area of to the, well, there's a road along here, and it's to the very right or east part of the site. And you'll notice all these blue things that they have. And these are large buckets, green and blue. And we're basically taking material out of the matrix, and they are recording as to where it's coming from. In other words, this collection is kept separate from this collection and this collection back in here. And we've photographed the strata, you can see, and they're collecting along the lines here, but down here it's a little bit lower. And that's noted in our notes. And it's quite different than just picking up rock, pulling them out of the strata and whacking and chucking them. We don't do any breaking of the rocks at the site. We put them in these buckets. Now that means a lot of, carrying, and because so many times I see people out at Maccabee, they come there and they have a little backpack, and they'll spend the day whacking and chucking uh, pieces of the rock out of the bedrock and looking for fossils. And at the end of the day, they have a backpack full, but a big pile of rubble around them, which is the discarded stuff. And so in this case here, there is none of that. Everything, if they're working at a particular area, they don't leave or mix areas apart when they put them into the bins. Everything is noted where it comes from and kept separate from other areas. And as you can see, they're having a lot of fun doing it. Some samples of the slabs being put back into the bins. So this is an example. This isn't from Maccabee, it's from another site in Princeton, but it's this one I just happened to have when I was preparing this. And this is what happens, is that all of this material, instead of being broken and try to find the fossils at the site, I bring it back to my lab here in Chilliwack, and I work with it. Now, one of the advantages is that I don't work with it right away. One of the problems of finding fossil material in shale, such as what you find in Maccabee and Princeton, is that when it rains, it affects the contrast of the fossils and the surrounding matrix. And it's very difficult sometimes to see certain types of fossils when there is very little, we call it, difference between the matrix and the fossil at all. And so if you allow it to dry out, even for a week, it'll make a difference. And you can see things better. So, and in many cases, I'm working right now with fossils that I collect, or matrix that I collected 15, 20 years ago. And so it's very easy to see a lot of things, because the contrast is the word I was thinking of. Contrast is, certainly able to see certain things like spiders, insect wings, things that are very delicate, feathers. And but you have to have the matrix dried out in order to identify those. And I find from experience, identifying those types of fossils in the field is very, very difficult, and you tend to miss them. So my working area has a big slab of metal, and just a sample of some of the chisels and tools I use. The chisels have been beveled to a finer point, because when you buy them, the edge is quite blunt compared to what I do with them. So I use a file or a grinder, and I grind down a nice point to the chisels. The other tools that I use is a simple ball peen hammer, snips for trimming excess material off, Wellbond glue, which I find is the best glue for repairing fossils, because things will break, a magnifying glass, and a brush to clean up material. The fact that I can have this material handy, in other words, I got the magnifying glass and the glue, is very, very important, because in the field, it's very difficult to start gluing pieces together. And so I find that if you have it, take it back home, and if something breaks when you're splitting it and breaking it apart, you've got the tools, you've got the light, and you've got the magnifying glass that you could see things. Will bond. This is something that I use in archaeology, putting pots together, and I find that it is the absolute best glue for putting fossils together as well. I've tried a whole variety of other things in the past, and Will bond works the best for me. This is my paleo class at the university. And so we can set up these little working areas just about anywhere. I taught grade 5 as my career job for almost 40 years. And I had 10-year-olds setting up what you see here at their desks. And they were collecting fossils the same way as these folks from the university. And if 10-year-olds can do it, and these university people can do it, we all can do it. So what they have is a block of steel and the same tools that I was showing before. And they're just taking the material that they collected in those bins, and we're splitting them. This is a sample of, as I sort things out, I gently lay these slabs down. If it's delicate, I put little pieces of paper between them and whatever, but these are not moving anywhere. So this is part of that process. So here's a sample of a hunk of shale, and this has been split, of course, but it's just an example that I had, and it's like taking a loaf of bread and splitting it in. And the first thing is I split it in half. You see little fossils starting to appear there. And in each half, I split again. Well, now I have that particular one was split into quarters, and each one of those I split again. So from that one piece of shale, and this is it right here. Look at the fossils that came out of here. And I have a little one that I was working with today. And in this piece here, there are 83 fossils. 83. And I can pretty well tell you that 80 of them would have been missed if I split that piece of rock in the field. The scrap material, it just gets hauled out. Now, that takes us to the end of this particular section here. I'm going to stop screen for a moment, and just to see if you have questions. I do have a video that maybe I should show the video first. Hang on. Now, it's a little bit tricky because Perry and I tried this the other day, and you won't hear anything, or at least you shouldn't, because we couldn't get the sound to work. But okay, now just a sec. You shouldn't see anything yet, right?
No, not yet.
Okay. I'm gonna fiddle with it here for a minute. Get back to the Zoom. All
Okay,
right.
I see it, Ken.
So I'm hitting the slab right in the middle. I start with a single tap, and then I go to a double tap. And I go all the way around all the different sides. You shouldn't be hearing the tapping. I could say tap, 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 tap. Getting it that way, I suppose. There we go. It's not quite in focus, but you get the idea. Now, the next trick is, how do I get out of this? So, okay. Okay, that's just an example of the method I use. First of all, how I collect the material in the field. I don't do any splitting at all in the field. I bring it all back and I do what you just saw there. I do it in my lab at my leisure. And the next step is, part of this is, what do I do with it afterwards? But maybe it's the time to take a break and have some questions if you have about this. It's what I do, and it works for me.